Hey everyone, welcome to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy. We just got the first trailer for The Mandalorian, a new TV series that's debuting on Disney Plus in November. I'm going to break down the trailer and talk about what a Mandalorian is, the show's connection to Boba Fett, and how this show is going to expand the Star Wars universe. But first, if you're new here, please subscribe and let me know which Star Wars show you're most excited for. Mandalorian, the Obi-Wan Kenobi series with Ewan McGregor, or The Clone Wars, which is returning for Season 7. First shots of the Mandalorian trailer show stormtrooper helmets covered in sand, and this is visually showing us that the time of the Empire has passed. The series takes place 7 years after the Battle of Endor and 2 years after the Battle of Jakku. Jakku was the death rattle for the Empire, and that's why Rey grew up around all these wrecked Imperial ships. But there are still Imperial factions fighting for scraps, as we'll see later in the trailer. Next, we see stormtrooper helmets on spikes, showing us that wherever this desert planet is, it's violently overthrown the Empire. This is telling us that the Outer Rim is lawless, and several new forces are now fighting for control. I have two theories about where this planet is. First, obviously, it could be Tatooine, Luke and Anakin's home planet. The Mandalorian takes place in the outer rim of the galaxy where the law had very little control, and we already know that Mos Eisley was
the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Tatooine was also the headquarters for Jabba the Hutt, making it a major hub for the galaxy's criminal element. And, as we've seen, there was already a huge Imperial presence on the planet. Here's an alternate theory. This could be Mandalore. So here's a little background about Mandalorians without going too far down a Wikipedia rabbit hole. Mandalorians were once a proud warrior race. Mandalorian armor, like Jango and Boba Fett wear, is typically hundreds of years old.
The armor I wear is 500 years old. I reforged it to my liking, but the battles, the history, the blood, all lives within it. And the same goes for every Mandalorian.
But the Mandalorian's planet was destroyed by civil war and became mostly an unlivable desert. Then the Mandalorians lived in special domed cities and mostly swore off war forever until a more violent faction overthrew the peaceful government during the Clone Wars. The last time we saw Mandalore was in the Star Wars Rebels TV series. In that show, the Mandalorians were fighting to overthrow the Empire and unite all of the various clans and houses of Mandalore. So this planet fits the description of Mandalore. Got desert and a lot of dead Imperials. Then we see a ship cruising over a lush green planet. This ship is actually called the Razor Crest, and it belongs to the main character, the Mandalorian. And next we see what appears to be the Mandalorian meeting with Carl Weathers' character, Greef Karga. Greef runs a bounty hunter guild. This kind of looks like snippets of the footage that was screened at Star Wars Celebration. These little bars are actually bounties for hire and contain information about the individual targets. In that Celebration footage, the Mandalorian wants all these bounties for himself, but Greef has to spread them to his other guild members. So, Greef hooks him up with a very valuable, off-the-books, underworld bounty that we're going to see later in the trailer. Then we see several gear-up shots, and I love how they're teasing the reveal of this character. You don't see him in full until halfway through the trailer, and even then, we don't see his face. I mean, you can't tell it from the trailer, but he's played by Pedro Pascal, Oberyn Martell from Game of Thrones.
I will be your champion.
And if you notice here, he doesn't have rocket launchers on his wrists like Boba Fett. Instead, he has Mandalorian van braces. These are more traditional Mandalorian weapons that were built to fight Jedi thousands of years ago. They contain darts and grappling hooks like we saw both Boba and Jango use. This character is Cara Dune, played by Gina Carano. She's an ex-rebel shock trooper who's kind of getting used to life after war. Like a lot of people in this series now, she's looking for her place in this more chaotic galaxy. In this shot, we see an Ugnaught, one of the Cloud City workers we saw in Empire Strikes Back. Ugnaughts are from the planet Ginties, but the Empire enslaved large numbers of them because they're such good workers. So this could be taking place on Ginties, or the Ugnaught could be a freed slave. We really don't know without more context. Next, we see a Twi'lek woman who, it's implied, is winking at the Mandalorian. This is inside some kind of hangar with a Razor Crest in the background, so I'm going to guess that this is the bounty hunter hub where Greef operates. Like this woman is another bounty hunter who's giving the Mandalorian this knowing wink. This is my favorite shot from the trailer, the long, wide shot, Lawrence of Arabia, Clint Eastwood in space shot. This really sells that this show is meant to feel like a space western and tell stories that are happening at the edges of the Star Wars galaxy. There are several shots showing an Imperial attack on a green watery planet that's probably also featured here. There's this woman huddling with her child, and these nighttime attacks with an AT-ST. Notice these barricades set up with wooden poles. I guess word got out after the Battle of Endor that the best way to stop an AT-ST walking tank is with logs. Speaking of Return of the Jedi callbacks, we see the return of a speeder bike, complete with the sound effect. But I think this Imperial attack is different from this one, which is in more of a desert planet. This is the planet where these death troopers fight under the command of an Imperial officer played by Giancarlo Esposito, or Gus from Breaking Bad. Death Troopers are an elite squad of Imperial stormtroopers who specialize in stealth. We saw them in the prologue of Rogue One arresting Galen Erso. There's lots of shots of battle in a small desert community that looks a lot like Mos Eisley. The Mandalorian works a large Gatling gun, but in the background notice the damage that's already been done to this town. This column is chewed up by laser fire. He's fighting alongside a battle droid who looks identical to IG-88 from Empire Strikes Back, but this is actually a new character, IG-11, voiced by Taika Waititi, director of Thor Ragnarok, and also the voice of Korg.
Oh, Mick, you're alive! He's alive, guys. What was your question again, bro?
Notice that they're not fighting stormtroopers in this town. I'm guessing that they showed up here to collect a bounty and these guys just got in the way. Like there's some kind of underworld gang who overthrew the Empire and put their heads on spikes. Next we see bits of a standoff with stormtroopers, and this is likely with the underworld client Greef sends the Mandalorian to meet. That's Werner Herzog, a former Imperial officer. Notice he's still wearing an Imperial medallion and commanding stormtroopers. I'm wondering if he's actually facing off against Giancarlo Esposito's character, and the two of them are vying to control the remnants of the Empire. Next, there's this fight in the bar where the Mandalorian takes down 3 goons and his main target, this guy. He's a Quarren, a species you might remember from Jabba's sail barge. They're an aquatic race who live on Mon Cala, the same planet as the Mon Calamari, like Admiral Akbar. But this scene does not happen on the desert planet. If you look carefully, you'll see it's actually winter outside. Also, the doorway is made of wood, and there's a giant fang from some monster here. I could see this being an early scene, unrelated to the larger story. Just an action beat to show us what this character can do. Notice how he blasts the controls, classic Star Wars, so the door will automatically shut and cut the man in two, also classic Star Wars. Then we see this same bounty frozen in carbonite beside several other slabs. This is a little silly because Empire Strikes Back implied that carbonite freezing was something they did to transport gas off Cloud City, and it wasn't a reliable way to capture a human.
We only use this facility for carbon freezing. You put him in there, it might kill him.
It's just that Vader was worried about a Jedi escaping, so he wanted to freeze him. Remember, they tested it on Han.
I do not want the Emperor's prize damaged. We will test it on Captain Solo.
But I guess now it's become standard practice for bounty hunters to work like this, judging by all these other slabs. Boba Fett was such a trailblazer.
Nerd alert!
So there's not a lot of reveals about the actual main character yet. We don't even get to see Pedro Pascal, and he's the lead of the series. They haven't even revealed the Mandalorian's real name, if they ever will. Jon Favreau just said they call him Mando as a joke, so that's a big part of the mystery of the show. Who is the Mandalorian, and does he have a connection to Boba Fett? Well, according to the Star Wars canon, Jango Fett was actually not a Mandalorian, even though he had Mandalorian armor. His clone Boba inherited the armor before he was swallowed by the Sarlacc. In the Star Wars novel Aftermath by Chuck Wendig, a character named Vance Cobb does find the armor and becomes sort of a sheriff of Tatooine, but I don't think that this guy is Vance Cobb. He's an actual Mandalorian who wants to help his people. In the Star Wars Celebration footage, Werner Herzog offers him a rare strip of Mandalorian iron called a Beskar as payment. He tells Herzog that the Beskar belongs with the Mandalorian people to help bring order to the planet and return them to their former glory. So even though the Mandalorian's a rogue and he seems like he's out for himself, he's actually fighting for Mandalore. So let me ask you this, do you think that after Solo flopped, is Star Wars going to have more success on TV than in the movies? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.